Welcome to One Voice Evolving. Today our guest is Jane Reid, who has spent over a decade teaching high school and college students how to study effectively based on their own struggles in school and the strategies she developed during college while earning her degrees in aerospace engineering and physics. She also writes a Substack called Plan with Jane, where she helps neurotypical women and families navigate the sometimes overwhelming and overstimulating obligations and responsibilities we all have. Today's conversation is a result of the question that I asked her last week: what has patriarchy cost you? And professional women especially have a lot of energy and some real life stories to tell. So Jane, welcome to the podcast. Let us know more about you. So today, you are the last episode of our 100 celebration, and
Cool.
so I'm going to drop with the question that you and I started to have, the conversation we started to have the other day that lit you up. And that
Yep.
question, which is what we're taking into the next 100 episodes, is what has patriarchy cost you? And as professional women and mothering women and parents with special needs and educators, you have such a variety of relatable experience. I think our audience can't wait to meet you, Jane.
Yeah.
So
That's
let's
fun.
start with your thought. Yeah, let's have some fun.
Yeah. What the patriarchy has cost me. Well, as a woman who is in aerospace engineering, I have degrees in aerospace engineering, physics, and math. So I am not undereducated by any means, but I was together with my now husband when we were both entering the workforce. And it was very interesting to see what his job search looked like compared to mine. So he put out, honestly, 2 or 3 applications. He heard back from all 3 of them, and he got all 3 jobs. Now, I want to be clear here, not to bash my husband, but he does not have an aerospace engineering degree. He has a physical science degree because he got kicked out of aerospace engineering for doing one too many credits too early. He took a extra class, and they were like, "Nope, you can't do that. Get out." And he was like, "But you know, the aerospace world is very tight." So he did not get his aerospace degree. He got a physical sciences degree, and I was his tutor all the way through. Okay. And so he got 3 job offers straight off the bat. He got to take his dream job. We moved across country for it. And I was applying and applying and applying and applying. And I would either hear nothing back, or I would hear back things like, "Oh, you applied to the wrong department, so we put your resume in the accounting department." Or when we applied for the same jobs or for the same company, we would hear, "Oh, you and this other person have the same address. Are you 2 together?" Well, we don't hire people who are together. So they'd hire him, but they wouldn't hire me. So
Okay.
I kept applying and I kept trying, and in the end I couldn't get a job in our industry. I had to take a job in an adjacent industry doing computer website design and stuff like that. And it's every time I've come back, I've been a web developer, I've been a teacher, and every time, I try to switch back into the aerospace engineering industry, and every time I hear the same things. I've heard, "Oh, you are perfect for this job. Having your teaching experience with your engineering experience would really help for you to be the, person who runs the intern program. And we really want you to do that. Apply again when you're 40.
When you're 40.
Yeah. After I'm done having babies. After, that time of my life is past, they would not hire me. And I kept trying, and, at some point you just go, you know what, this isn't the path, right? clearly this isn't the path. So, you know, I've put my energy and my effort into education and helping build other engineers, you know? And um I think that's important. I think that's worthwhile. I think that we need more women in engineering, and I think that it's really hard for women to be in engineering. You know, for every one woman that makes it into the room, there are 10 others knocking at the door. And a friend of mine said at one point, the issue isn't trying to get women interested into engineering. It's not trying to get them into, you know, doing these kinds of jobs. The issue is removing sexist men from the hiring decisions, because that's what keeps us from getting in the door. That's what keeps us from moving on. That's what keeps us locked out. And when it's a male dominated field, it's very difficult to deal with that and to move through that and to, you know, get in the door.
And then stay
So,
once you're there. And then stay once you're there.
yeah, exactly. And then stay once you're there and get further and further along. My mother has 2 master's degrees and a PhD, and she was in a male dominated field. She was the policy side of the engineering project, you know, making sure the engineers got the opportunity to build. And she retired at the same pay level as my father, at the same grade as my father. And he has an accounting degree that he barely finished, that people had to cajole him into doing. So it's like, we don't make it as far when we do get in the door. We struggle to get in the door in the first place. And, you know, that's really not fair. And we're really shooting ourselves in the foot, because women see things differently. We experience the world differently, and we have a different perspective. And when you have that different perspective, your engineering is better. I remember that my husband was building this space plane, and he was very excited about this, and they were, you know, getting close to launching, and we got to go in and see it. And I got to sit in the cockpit. And I sat in the cockpit for about 30 seconds before I turned to him and said, "So you're only having male pilots?" And he goes, "No, we have female pilots on the roster." I'm like, "Yeah, but they can't operate the plane because they can only reach about a third of the buttons that they need to reach." And he goes, "Wait a second." And he had me try to operate the plane, and key systems were out of my reach. You know, I was leaning over sideways to push that button. And a few of them I had to like pull myself up out of the chair to get to them, which is dangerous because what's in front of you? The wheel, right? The yoke.
Yeah.
And so what? I accidentally pull back on the yoke, and now we're in a nosedive to reach a crucial button, you know? And it's like those kinds of issues come up in engineering. Women have a tendency to, because of the way that we're socialized, right? We think about maintenance, right? Because we're the one who's going to clean it. We're the one who's going to maintain it. We're the one who's, you know, going to make sure everything is in order and that everything fits. So we see a lot of problems in car systems where women weren't on the engineering team. Those are the cars where you have to take the engine out to change the spark plugs. Those are the cars where you don't have any backseat pockets for the people in the back seats, you know? And that kind of thing is a minor annoyance, the kind of thing that's like, oh, as an engineer, I look at this and I say, this could have been done better. And this could have saved a lot of people a lot of money. And this could have saved a lot of people a lot of heartache. You know, a lot of, you know, top downers, right? Convertible cars don't have backseat pockets because they think, oh, you're going to have adults in the backseat. That's going to be used sparingly, etc. I have a convertible. I got it from my parents. My kids sit in the backseat every day. That's the car I have. You can't just assume that a car is only going to be driven and used by men and sparingly people in the back seat. That's not how cars work. That's not how, cars get passed around. And we see this in lots of places in engineering where things are just designed for men, by men, and women and children are an afterthought, and women and children make up the bulk of the population, right? Take drills, for example. The average drill is designed for the male hand. I don't know about you, but it hurts to use most drills. You're stretching your hand in a weird way. It's all, out of order, and then the drill is too heavy to use, and the batteries are too heavy to use, and it's off balance because the battery side or the drill side, depending on the drill, one of them is heavier. And so you're fighting trying to even hold this thing. Meanwhile, men just pick it up and use it, and they're like, why are you so bad at, using the drill? Why don't you like using power tools? You're just scared. And it's like, no, it hurts. I can't hold it. I can't use it safely. In my entire life, I've found exactly one drill that I can use well and safely and feel comfortable using, because it's designed to be used. It was a drill that was designed to be used by women and children. Right. And you know what? My 7-year-old can use it. And she's not afraid of it the way she is with a regular drill that she has to put her whole body into using,
Isn't the premise of engineering, good engineering, isn't it fit, form, and function?
Yes. Okay. Yes, it is. Followed
so it depends on who's telling the story or who's designing the product.
And who are they designing it for? We've seen, and it's not just physical product engineering. There was, and I can't remember which city in a Nordic country, and I can't remember which one, but they at one point sat down and decided, hey, we're seeing a lot of accidents with women and children in the winter. And we think it might be because we're plowing the streets before we plow the sidewalks, because we're thinking, oh, men have to get to work, so let's plow the streets for the cars, and then we'll plow the sidewalks for the women and children. Only the thing is, vast majority of the people in this country use public transportation. So they weren't plowing for public transportation. And that meant that the women and children who are also going to work and school at the same time are in more danger of being, hit by a bus, hit by a car, hit by, in general, slipping and falling into the road, etc. So they decided, you know what, this year we're going to try it, and we're going to plow the sidewalks and the bus lanes first, and the cars can wait. And they did, and they reduced traffic fatalities almost to zero from that for pedestrians. And they found that people were more productive, people were less likely to come in late, because it's not just women and children that use the public transportation. It's not just women and children that walk to work. But when you design for women and children, when you design for neuroatypicals, when you design for the lowest level of the population, it benefits everyone. The cars weren't late to work because they plowed the sidewalks and the bus lanes first. In fact, most people then decided when the weather was too bad, they were just going to take the bus. And that increased revenue for the city, that prevented cars from blocking up things, that gave plows more time to clear the streets. And everybody still got everything done. So we need, and this is so hard with the patriarchy, right? Because the patriarchy thinks white man is default. That's who we're designing everything for. That's what everything is based on. White male is default. And that's actually not the case. That's not the case in the world. White male, I don't even think they make up 34% of the United States population.
No. Well, and they're
You've
certainly
got
not the global majority. Yeah.
no, and there's 51% of the U.S. population is women. Then you've got a bunch of children, right? Then you've got people who are elderly, and elderly people are often designed for the same way children are designed for, because children and elderly people have the same mobility issues with their hands, right?
Okay.
Often. So, things that are designed for, let's see if we can open up the medicine bottle. The thought
Yeah.
is not, let's design it for an elderly person necessarily, because we're not sure what an elderly person, there's no average elderly person, right? Some people have arthritis, some people don't. Some people lose strength in their arms and hands, some people don't. It's really hard to pin down what you're supposed to engineer and design for that. So you design for a 5-year-old's hands, which does not have the dexterity of an adult hand, right? They can't tie shoes, they struggle with certain tasks, and they don't have much strength. And if a 5-year-old can do it, then we size it up for an adult hand, and any senior citizen should be able to do it. Does that make sense?
Yep, it does.
So you don't, but when you're thinking about that, right? Like, how many 5-year-olds are there? How many senior citizens are there? If a 5-year-old can open it, then a 20-year-old with severe arthritis can open it too, right? So when you design for the lowest population, for the person who's going to have the most trouble, it makes it easier on everyone, right?
Well, of course. Yeah, or anyone caregiving for that person who's accompanying
Exactly.
them.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. So not everybody needs every accommodation, but when you build it like they do, and when you design systems like they do, we've found that in education, for example, classrooms that use systems designed to help neuroatypical students thrive, those are the classrooms that have the highest scores for neurotypicals, because the coping strategies used by neuroatypicals are useful for neurotypicals too. It doesn't even look different. It's helpful. I'm sorry, can you repeat that?
Yes, will you define for us what you mean by neuroatypical or neurotypical?
A neurotypical is a person who has no learning disabilities whatsoever. They are the standard. It's about 80% of people who can just function. And I am a neuroatypical. Neuroatypicals are people with ADHD, people with autism, people with dyslexia, dyscalculia, dysgraphia, people whose brains work differently. And that makes up about 20% of the population. And every neuroatypical is different in what their needs are. However, when you use coping strategies that help neuroatypicals, that help people with ADHD, that help people with autism, okay, those same things help people who don't have those things too. So, for example, one of my daughters, she is autistic. One of her accommodations in the classroom was to have a routine checklist. Okay, these are the things I need to get done every day, and this is the order that they get done in. Okay.
Yeah.
Well, they found pretty quickly that all of the kids in the class were referencing her checklist. Did I do my math work? I can't remember. Let me go check. According to Jude's checklist, the math work is in the red folder. Okay, let me go to my red folder and check that I did my math work, right? And so things like checklists, which are necessary for someone who can't keep all of that in their brain, are helpful for someone who can but got distracted, right? So when we design things for the people who have the most trouble, when we design things for neuroatypicals, when we design things for, kids who struggle with using their hands, we open up the design so that everyone else can access. And we need to not be designing to male standards, because the reality is men in and of themselves aren't a majority of people on the planet. They're not even a majority of people in the United States, you know? Male,
and yet
just straight up male, is only 49%.
And yet they are 90% of the decision-making boards of organizations or governance. Or my question to you about education and about patriarchy is, so we identify the differences, we start STEM for girls, we do all the things. Is there anybody teaching these young females about what's going to happen when they try to enter their field of choice in a patriarchal governance environment?
No, and I think that's very wrong. My mom grew up telling me that I could do anything, and everybody kept telling me, oh, you're going to be a great scientist, you're going to be a great engineer, everything's going to be fine. It's like childbirth, right? They tell you it's going to be magical. They tell you it's going to be easy. They tell you you're going to forget it. And then you get there and you're like, why am I in so much pain? What is going on here? Very few people are real about what this looks like, about what the fight looks like. And, you know, every once in a while you have, you know, a movie like, what's the movie called? I am so terrible with names. I apologize.
Hidden Figures is one of them.
Hidden Figures, right? Every once in a while you have a movie like Hidden Figures where it shows the struggle, but they frame it not as, you know, Hidden Figures isn't framed as the struggle is because they are women. Hidden Figures is framed as the struggle is because they are Black. And yes, also true, 100%. And being a Black woman is one of the hardest things that you can be. And there's just nothing, you know, about that. But when it's framed that way, then all girls, regardless of race, class, etc., think, oh, the issue was racism, it wasn't sexism. Right. And they don't see the intersectionality there. They don't see that all of the women are struggling, that all of the women are not paid well, right?
Yeah.
And so that's a problem too.
In that movie and in that role, as you're talking, and I'm remembering that movie because I was fascinated by it, they also don't talk about what I'm talking about in the next season, which is that is the women who uphold the patriarchy the most so they can preserve their proximity to power. The white women particularly who keep that ceiling on.
It's ingrained. Remember that these women are raised with the patriarchy. I was raised with a flaming liberal feminist for a mom and a dad who was only marginally less flaming liberal. Only marginally, not much, not enough to matter. Okay. You know, I can remember having arguments with my mother when we were addressing the envelopes about how they were to be addressed, because on the one hand, you've got the way that's polite and that people know, like Mr. and Mrs. whatever. And on the other hand, you have the way that's, you know, feminist, which is MS for all the women, which I did. And then I also, you know, addressed my envelopes with the woman first. But like, there's just a whole lot in the patriarchy that, you know, is designed to keep women in their place and designed to keep them down. And, you know,
and there are
some
rules
women benefit
written,
from it.
Rules unwritten. So they would never, it is not EEOC compliant to tell a woman to come back when she's 40 and done having babies to apply for this job. But in actual practice, that is the barrier that women run into, that nobody told us how to navigate.
Yeah. And we're not taught how to navigate, and that's on purpose. Just like kids aren't taught how to study, and that's on purpose. And that's to keep the status quo where it is. because the rich can find workarounds. They can have, friends already in the room. They can be Nepo babies and Nepo hires. They can teach their kids how to study because they can hire people who can teach them. And they can work around this. And if you don't have that, you don't have that. Neither of my parents are engineers. And so I thought I wanted to go to school for aerospace engineering, and everybody told me that that was a great idea. And when I got there, I realized the type of problems I needed to solve, I needed to be a mathematician and a physicist for. Like, I needed to do theoretical physics. And I didn't learn that until I was in my junior year of college. And the reason I didn't learn that, and the reason I didn't get in that early, and the reason I didn't get that set up is because my parents aren't scientists. They're not engineers. And they create these dynasties. The only other woman from my graduating class who graduated with a job, okay, in aerospace engineering. Her dad was an administrator at NASA, and she got a job at NASA. So they create these dynasties, that whole, we think of the past and we think about, how the cobbler raised his son to be a cobbler, who raised his son to be a cobbler, and you've got 15 generations of cobblers, right? And we like to say that America is a meritocracy. We like to pretend that that's the case, but we're really still operating on that generational lineage that's happening. And part of that is the patriarchy. Part of that is locking people out. And so if you're poor, if you don't have any connections in the industry you're going into, if you're a woman, if you're a person of color, you're fighting against those dynasties. You're fighting against that insider knowledge. And one of my books for college kids is actually about that insider knowledge for engineering and the things that you need to know in order to pass. They make, exams that are nearly impossible. And the only way to pass them is to know what's going to be on the exam. Well, how do you know what's going to be on the exam? Well, your local chapter of the professional society has an office where they keep all of the past exams written by every professor in the school. If you don't have that generational knowledge, you don't know that. You don't know that that's where you need to be studying. You don't know that half of your classmates, the ones that always get A's, when they disappear to study, that's where they're going, And how are you supposed to know that without that generational knowledge, without having someone in the know, without being on the inside? I didn't learn that until my senior year. I went from like a struggling B student to a straight A student nearly overnight. And it's like, you have to know these things. You have to find a mentor who has that generational knowledge. And otherwise you're fighting uphill. You're swimming upstream. There's nothing helping you, and there are people actively holding you back.
So Jane, so let's talk about the pivot. So you weren't over 40, you were still having your family. They kept trying to put you in finance instead of in science. And you took your power, privilege, and presence and started something new and unusual. I have two questions. I want to know about how all that intersects, and I want to know how you are taking what you learned about how to study and the things that are going to get you from B's to A's. How are you equipping the next generation of scientists and engineers?
So I went, and I spent several years as a teacher down in Texas in a very poor school. And I was the person who could get those kids who were about to fail out to pass their STAR exam, their exams for algebra that allow them to graduate. And I had a success rate of, if you show up to class and you do your work and you pay attention, you're going to pass. Okay. And then I also had the privilege of having the AP kids. So I had the worst kids in the school and I had the best kids in the school. And one of those things that I noticed was that the worst kids in the school weren't failing because they were bad at math. I honestly believe there's no such thing as being bad at math. There's just bad teachers and bad habits. So you learn bad habits from bad teachers, and then you don't understand the process that you're supposed to be understanding, and you don't know how to study, and so you just get stuck in these bad habits, and that makes you bad at math. Okay? And you know, I had kids, they weren't bad at math. They weren't bad at math. They were bad at studying. They lacked resources. I had this one kid who had taken the Algebra 1 star 8 times, I think it was. And he had failed it all 8 times, but not because he couldn't pass it. He was very poor. He had to work to help support his family. He had younger siblings, and for 4 of those times, he got a call in the middle of the test that invalidated his test because his younger sibling of one of them had thrown up or had been sick or had been injured and needed to be picked up from school, and he was the only one available, so he had to leave the test early. It invalidated his test and he wasn't able to take it. There were a few other instances where he had worked 3 nights in a row and slept through the test, you know, and stuff like that. So he never actually fully took the test. And this kid is sitting in my class, bored out of his mind, capable of doing calculus, but he's going to fail out of high school because he can't get around to taking this test. You know, there were a lot of kids like that, and he should have become an engineer. He should have grown up. And honestly, honest to God, this kid should have been one of those finance gurus on Wall Street who's like doing code breaking and crap, because he just, his understanding of math was intuitive. He dropped out of high school. On the other end of the spectrum, you've got kids in AP classes who have every support available to them. They've got middle class and upper middle class parents who are willing to, you know, spend thousands of dollars on tutors if it's needed. And these kids get by, you know, having a general level of intelligence and smartness that's been beaten into them, but then they don't study it. So then they lose it. So then they fail the SAT because they've forgotten all of their math. Because in the past, they only had to remember it long enough to take the test. Yeah. So they never learned how to study, learned how to remember it. And there's 2 kinds of learning in school. And this is what the AI, you know, people don't understand, who suggest that AI be used in school. There's fact learning, right? The War of 1812 happened in 1812. Columbus sailed the ocean blue whenever he sailed the ocean blue, right? Things that you memorize, okay? Facts. And then there's process learning. Can you write an essay? And what students often confuse, and what people who suggest using AI as an accommodation and stuff like that often confuse, is that writing the essay about the War of 1812 is not about learning about the War of 1812. Writing an essay about the War of 1812 is about learning how to do research. It's about learning how to form an opinion and support it. And it's about learning how to communicate with the written word. Those are all invaluable skills, okay? I'm a math teacher. I will tell you that those skills are more important than anything you could learn in my class, okay? Because how can you synthesize and understand a word problem if you can't understand the written word, right? So, you know, these skills that you're supposed to be learning are so valuable. You can't write an email as an adult if you can't write an essay, right? Yeah. Those 2 skills are transferable. You can't read and understand the legal documents in your house if you can't read and understand diverse, types of research, right? If you can't read a book, how are you going to sign these documents and know what they're for? So we have to teach these process skills. And when we teach study skills and when we teach how to learn in school, we don't have time as teachers to teach these process skills. We are inundated by um by exams for the state, by exams for the country, by standardized testing. When I was teaching, I had to give my kids a standardized test for math almost every month. When you have standardized tests going that quickly, there's no time for anything else. You memorize this and you memorize that, and then you take the test, and then you're doing it again, right?
Yeah. And it is that understanding that in your academic experience, the people who knew where the tests were moved from B's to A's because they studied to the test. Passed the test didn't necessarily mean they comprehended the material any better than they had before.
And that's true.
Yes.
That's true for university as well. And so when we talk about learning, when we talk about what you're supposed to walk away from school with, it's not about knowing facts. It's about being able to have these skills, right? So we need to, there is a plane overhead. I don't know if you can hear it. We need to be able to study process, okay? And memorization works for learning languages. Memorization works for learning history, but memorization doesn't work for math. It doesn't work for science, and it doesn't work for fluency in language. Once you start getting to the grammar portion of language, you need to be thinking process, right? And so the books I write are about how to study process, how to actually understand the information you're taking in. I don't need to know facts. I can look up facts on Google all day long. I can find them in books. I can pull a table of values from nearly anywhere. I can reference the periodic table. I don't need to memorize it. But I do need to know what to do with the periodic table once I have it in front of me.
Yeah.
And that's the part of education that's being missed. And that's the part of education that people are not understanding, that it's really the point when they start suggesting, oh, we need to have more AI in the classroom. Because AI only deals in fact. It doesn't deal in process at all. Right? Having AI write an essay for you.
And it deals in the language model of the patriarchy. So at the same time it is giving you its version of facts, it is for that white male minority, not for the global majority who are experiencing multiple barriers.
Exactly. So it's not, you should not be using AI to write your essay for you, because writing the essay is not about the facts that you're supposed to be representing. It's about learning how to communicate.
Yes.
Doing a proof in math is not about, proving that a triangle is a triangle. You're never going to need to prove a triangle is a triangle in real life. You're just going to say, that's obviously a triangle. 3 sides, 3 corners, triangle, right? The point of doing proofs in math is to learn logic so that you can support your arguments, so that you can prove something to someone else that's not so trivial as what is a triangle, right?
Yeah. It teaches you
to
think.
That's important.
So when you write your books, I'm making an assumption, correct me if I'm wrong, that you write them for neuroatypical students, because then neurotypical benefit from that as well. Yes? No?
I write them I write them for students who have small attention spans, who are struggling, because the student who's struggling is most likely to have a smaller attention span. They're this thick. I forgot to bring them out with me. They're this
cool.
thick, and they are meant to be read by the student who's struggling in 1 to 2 hours and immediately be put to work, and they're meant to be references. I have, each chapter is about a different study technique that you can use. And I suggest, if you're studying properly, okay, to learn process, and you build your routine to incorporate this studying, you should not be studying more than 15 minutes per class per day. And most of the time, you should be studying for 5 minutes per class per day. And if you do that properly, then you don't need to have those big all day long study sessions when you start coming up with the test, because it's already there and it's already in long-term memory and you've already got it. And I've been tutoring students for 20 years now. And my students have every single one of them, when I implement this with them, have found that to be true. My students stop studying for their exams. They turn into those kids that everybody envies, who appear to never study. They do their homework. They turn it in. They get an A on the test. They have ridiculous amounts of free time because they implement the study habits and the study sessions. And you shouldn't be doing long study sessions. A neuroatypical can't do a long study session. They don't have the ability to sit here and absorb. But the human brain also just can't do that in general. Mm-hmm. We get to a point where the time doesn't equal more knowledge, and that point is about 3 hours. And that's assuming you take breaks. If you're studying for more than 3 hours in a shot, you're not learning anything else. Your brain's not going to do it. You need a nap first. We take our memories from short-term to long-term in naps and in sleep. And you can only keep so much in your short-term memory. And 3 hours is the limit for the neurotypical. Neuroatypicals have a smaller limit than that. And so you can't just sit down and study all day and think you're doing something. You have diminishing returns after about 3 hours. You need to go do something else. You need to do something called junk learning. Okay? And we all do junk learning. Junk learning is the doom scrolling on Pinterest, when your brain just doesn't want to anymore. It's watching the Kardashians because they are so stupid and you want to make fun of them. Or, it's watching that, whatever that guilty pleasure is, whatever that rabbit hole you go down when you want to read about something, but you don't actually want to feel like you're doing anything,
Yeah.
That's junk learning. And it's necessary. It's necessary. It's like the palate cleanser between courses on a multi-course dinner. It's that thing that clears out all the cobwebs, makes your brain use all the parts of it of itself. It's like a nice long stretch, right? Mm-hmm. The issue is you can't only do junk learning. You can't. You got to stop at some point and do something real and use your brain for something else, right? That requires focus, that requires you to sit down and pay attention and all that jazz. And that's the hard part. That's the hard part.
That's why you keep saying, you've said it several times, proper study. If you study properly. So properly is a ratio of junk learning to intentional absorption? Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. So the easiest study technique, the one that takes the least amount of time, that has the biggest impact, only takes about 2 minutes. You ready? I can teach it to you right now. All right. You take out a blank sheet of paper and you write down every single thing you can remember learning about this topic. All of it. Okay, whatever topic it is you're learning, you write it down. This usually takes about 60 to 90 seconds. Then you go through, you take that piece of paper, you go back through your notes and you correct it. Anything that's wrong, you take a different color pen or pencil or something and you correct it. Okay, this usually takes 60 to 90 seconds. Throw the paper away, you're done. That's it. That's it. If you did that after every single class, you would forget nothing. And part of it is that it's recall, right? The issue isn't just putting it in your brain, it's digging it back out. Yeah. And in order to dig it back out, you have to fire those neurons that have you digging it back out. And if you dig it back out often enough, right? And you practice this after every class, you practice this every day, you know, for whatever it is you're trying to learn, then when it comes time to use it, it's there. Mm-hmm. It's there. You don't even have to think about it. It's there. And the more you do this study technique, the faster it becomes because it's all there. You don't have to stop and think about anything. You know, often the first time I do this technique with my kiddos, it takes them 5 minutes before they're like, I don't think I remember anything else. And they're moving real slow and it takes them a while and, you know, they have a hard time. And the second time they do it, it's half that time. And the third time they do it, it's half that time. And then they get to a point where they just set a timer for 60 seconds. And if they can't get it all written down in 60 seconds, well, that's because they're tired today, you know? So it's just, you know, stuff like that. And we don't have time as teachers to teach it. And half the teachers in high school do not, for math and for science, don't actually have math or science as their background. So they don't know that these techniques exist. And almost no one in elementary school and in middle school has math or science as their background. So you've got these elementary school, you know, teachers teaching math that they themselves struggled with and never really came to rights with.
So what age group do they usually come to you?
I'm sorry, can you repeat that?
What age group do they usually come to you for help?
I teach predominantly late middle school, high school, and college. And my students are generally the kids who are in algebra and they're struggling. You know, That's usually when I pick them up. I have this one student who, his parents came to me. He had ADHD, executive functioning disorder, and dyslexia. And they were a family of doctors. Literally every single person in that family had a different discipline as an MD, including all of this kid's older brothers. They were all going to med school of some flavor. One of his siblings was becoming a vet. One of them was becoming a pediatrician. Another one was becoming a maxillofacial surgeon. Like, ridiculous. Okay? These are all very smart people. And his parents came to me and said, he is failing every class. We know that he's stupid. And we know he's going to be one of those cart people at the grocery store. But we at least want him to get through high school. So if you could make sure he can pass high school, that would be great. I had him for 3 months and he went from a straight F student to a straight B student. After another 3 months, he was a straight A student. And now he has a full ride to med school. And he's going to be a neurosurgeon.
Oh.
So, I mean, these techniques, not everybody should be going to college. You know, not everybody has that drive. Not everybody wants to. Not everybody should be. Okay. But everybody should have the opportunity. Everybody should have the option. Right. Yeah. And the way I see students, the way I see people is we all start out with so many eggs, right? And there are an infinite number of baskets. And some of us stack our academic basket nice and heavy with eggs, and some of us have no eggs in the academic basket. And that's fine. We all are more or less the same level of intelligence, It's just where we put our intelligence that matters. It's like, you know, how you build your video game character. Everybody has slightly different stats, right?
Mm-hmm.
But we all have the same amount of points to allocate. So a kid who doesn't stack their basket heavy with academics, they don't need to go to college. There are other options, but those options, going to trade school and stuff, those tend to be very male-dominated fields. And women need the option of going into welding more, being firefighters more. There are tasks on the force for being a firefighter that are uniquely suited to the female form versus the male form, you know, and they don't talk about that, and they push women out and they make it hard, you know. Underwater welding is easier for women than it is for men because women have less size to be pushed around by the currents, and we're more aerodynamic generally. So we should have, if we had a truly egalitarian society and everything were doing what it was supposed to be doing, we would have more or less population representative numbers of women and men in every discipline. There wouldn't be disciplines with more men than women. There wouldn't be disciplines with more women than men. There would be, you know, because people would do what they want, what their passions are, what they feel comfortable with. And there are an equal number of women for each of those as there are for men. But that's not the society we live in. And we're poorer for it.
Right. And certainly we're poorer for it socioeconomically and psychologically, psychological safety at risk. So I want to know about, we're getting ready to wrap up, I want to know about not only how people find you, but do you virtual coach? You know, if I've got a granddaughter, and I do, who I want to get your education in her hands, how would I approach that? What are the steps I would take?
I am on Substack. You can contact me on Substack. That's fine. I have a website, STEM911.com, because, you know, sometimes you have a crisis in STEM and need help. And I'm also on Wyzant, which if you want me to tutor you, if you want me to coach you, that's the place to contact me, because that handles all the billing and stuff and makes things easier. And you can find me on there. I'm Jane Reid, you know,
Awesome.
and yeah, you know, contact me on Medium, contact me on Substack.
Right.
I am around.
And so the books, you told me you've written 6 books?
Yeah, I think so.
Okay.
Somewhere between, I've written 6. I think I've published 4 or 5 of them.
Gotcha.
It's hard to keep track.
And so
and I have a few other books in the wings.
And so are those coursework books then that you use when you're working with a family, not out, or they're out there to buy and say, here, self-study?
They're out there to buy. I have some of my students who get into more advanced stuff that I have them buy them. But if I'm working with you, I usually give you the content of the book as we work. You know? And I am a terrible businesswoman. I am absolutely the worst. I want you to be successful without me. So my average tutoring time with kids is about a year. You know, I don't make them buy my book, which I probably should. You know, I want you to get the information once and get what you need and move on. And my Substack, because of that, is not about studying. My Substack is about how to function as a woman in the world who's neuroatypical, who can't necessarily juggle all these balls, or who has a neuroatypical family. One of the articles I've written is about how to have a sensory-friendly Christmas. You know, Christmas is overwhelming. So many lights, so many sounds, so many things that you have to do, so many new, you know, everything, right? And that can be overwhelming either as a woman planning it or as a kid going through it. So, how do you do this to still have all of the festiveness, to still have all of the fun that Christmas gives without any of the pain of overstimulation, without any of the anxiety of, did I get those Christmas cards sent? All of that. How do you make that easier? And so these guides are really written to help, neuroatypical women, but they'll help any woman who's overwhelmed, right?
Right.
Because again, good design does that. Right?
And we're life design at this point. It's beautiful.
Yeah,
Okay.
right?
I love that. I'm on Substack, and we will drop these episodes, clips of these on Substack. So hopefully you'll get some new attention and readers out of that deal. So it's Jane J. Reid, R-E-I-D. Okay. All right. And all of your contact information will be in the show notes from this episode. We do the video on YouTube, and then it goes across all the podcast channels. And you are dropping this Sunday at noon Eastern time. This episode will drop. So that's whatever day this is. I don't have it. I think
Cool.
the 7th, June 7th. Thank you. Oh my gosh, Jane, so much for your time. Do you have any parting thoughts for our guests?
If you're overwhelmed, that's normal. Capitalism is designed to overwhelm us. And if you're really overwhelmed and you think you might be neuroatypical and you think you might be ADHD or, autistic or something like that, know that women were not being diagnosed and girls were not being diagnosed with those things until very recently. And you may very well be. And there's nothing wrong with being overwhelmed. There's nothing wrong with building accommodations into your life. And if you do it right, if you recognize these pain points that are hurting you and you build your environment to work for you, you don't have to be overwhelmed anymore. You don't have to be. You don't have to live that way. And you shouldn't. So if you're feeling overwhelmed, check me out. I'm happy to help.
Thank you. Thank you. Perfect, perfect, perfect.